Hi, welcome to our next video post. I think of it as a week in review. I was thrilled to see another great week of discussion. I really enjoyed how detailed everyone was getting. I encourage that. The more details we include in our posts, the more we really have to discuss. It's one thing to talk about these generalities that are up here, but then we really kind of get into the nitty-gritty. I think things get much more interesting. Um, so let me proceed here with some shout outs to people who did particularly good work. Um, I really appreciate everyone doing a good job on their discussion threads. It's really the main way we have of interacting week to week, other than the occasional sort of office hours. Um, and yeah, these weren't the only people to do good work this week, but they were some of the best posts that I saw. So first, I wanted to highlight Allison's post, who had an excellent comparison of monistic and dualistic views within Hinduism. The degree of the differences that Allison identified between these two viewpoints within Hinduism, for me, brought me back to this question that sometimes scholars raise as to whether or not we can talk about monistic and dualistic schools of thought within Hinduism as really being within Hinduism, or if we should think about them as different traditions altogether. There's a great book on this subject called "Who Invented Hinduism" by David Lorenzen, famous scholar of Hinduism, and it raises and gets to the heart of this kind of problem of classification. What do we do when we have a tradition that, in many respects, has sort of been shaped by its encounter with other forces from outside of the region? In particular, here I'm thinking about the scholarly argument that really the British were the ones who quote unquote invented Hinduism, and that's part of the question that Lorenzen digs into in his great book. We're going to face this type of classification issue a lot during this semester, especially because this category of religion, if you recall from chapter 1, right, it comes out of a particular historical and social and intellectual moment, namely the Enlightenment in Western Europe, and even a particular school of Christianity or sect or denomination of Christianity, Protestantism, is very, very influential in how the academic subject of religion is constructed. So these categories, these terms, they don't come to us. What's the Latin term? Sui generis, right? Like kind of born of themselves, right? They come shaped and formed and influenced and sifted by all these other people in between us and some quasi historical origin point in the past. So that's something for us to think about as we move forward. Connor had a good post talking about the role of bhakti, or the bhakti movement, and one good quote was that the practice of bhakti seems to have a history of being much more accepting of women than most other religions. So I think, unquote, so I think you're totally right that we find a degree, probably more than a degree, of patriarchy when we look at many, many, many different religious traditions. And so each week, one thing we can look for, whether it's in the textbook or the podcasts I sign or other articles, is material highlighting the extent to which women have begun to take up more and more leadership positions within different religious communities. Now, looking at what we have to cover the rest of the semester, I can think of great examples from Hinduism, from Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, just for starters, but we should really be able to find it no matter where we're looking. And even if we don't identify women who have taken up leadership positions, we can certainly identify a debate that has taken place around this question. Now, leadership roles, of course, is only one way of parsing out um, changes in attitudes towards gender, but it's an important one. So I think it's one place that we can start. And then, I had the article on can women be ascetics in Hinduism, and Tyler had this post comparing how Bevilacqua in that article, and then how Broad in the textbook addressed this question, or maybe more broadly, um, the question of women in Hinduism. Um, and both sources find that there's certainly a degree of patriarchy. And I think our next move would be to interrogate whether or not, or perhaps the extent to which we can differentiate between religion per se and culture. So, in the question of whether women can be, full ascetics within the Hindu tradition, is this really a question of how we interpret sacred text, or is it also a question of what are these broader norms around gender within India or South Asia when we're talking about Hinduism? And so this question of religion and culture, to what extent can we separate them? That's just going to haunt us, all semester, for better and for worse. So, um, honestly, this week is a good example of a case where ideally we would just have a whole course on Hinduism, and then we could have many, many more opportunities to discuss this question of gender. We could find 3 or 4, or even hell, I could find you 10 different books, let alone articles, addressing this question of gender and gender roles in Hinduism. So my hope is that throughout the semester, you identify particular issues or questions that you would like to pursue, and that the course provides you with the basic tools to do that. So, and certainly I encourage you to contact me with more detailed questions if just don't feel like they're getting fully addressed through our discussions. All right, I want to talk a little bit about this coming week, where we're going to be talking about yoga, which is a subject that I think a lot of people, at least when I teach this subject now compared to, say, 20 years ago when I was first studying it myself, there seems to be a much greater degree of familiarity with it, at least with the asana-based hatha yoga that focuses, on the postures. That's what asanas mean. That's what we find here in the U.S. and really throughout the world. So for the assignments, you're going to read the Yoga Sutra by Patanjali, and then you're going to listen to a series of podcasts that are kind of doing more of a pop critical analysis of yoga. So what I want you to consider is the degree to which you can find connections between what you feel you're learning about when you read the text itself, and then what you hear these different scholars and pundits talking about in the podcasts, and then also just what you yourselves know from personal experience or other coursework and so forth. And I'll just, as a hint, and the weekly weird dad joke, it might be a stretch to say that they're really that connected. And the last thing I want to bring up is, I share a few things week to week in a discussion thread or through announcements, and whether it's books or documentaries or music, whatever it is. And I would really encourage all of you to do the same. I have this kind of ongoing database, right, for each of these traditions, and interesting movies or books and so forth. But I can't possibly keep up with everything, so I would really love it if all of you could, share what you know about, as long as it's pertinent to what we're discussing in class. So, thank you for another great week of discussion, and I hope you have a great rest of your weekend here. I'm posting this, early Sunday afternoon, and I hope we have a great week. So thanks so much, and see you soon.